Hello, today we're going to talk about black powder pistols a little bit. Some of the things you're going to need if you buy one. So the first thing obviously you're going to need is powder. But the question is, well, which one? Well, you see, that gets confusing. So it depends, honestly, on a couple of factors. What caliber your pistol is. And I say that because all of my experience with black powder pistols, the only learning that I got on it, other than just sheer experience and learning and doing it the hard way, was from Elmer Keith's books on revolvers that he wrote. And in those books, he says that in anything larger than 36 caliber, that it's okay to use double F powder. So, assuming that we're working with a 44 or larger, we're going to use some form of double F powder. Double F referring to the size of the granule. The less Fs, the larger the granule. It's a ridiculous system. I didn't come up with it. Now, so we've gotten down to that. Now, if you are going to be working with 36 or 32 or 31s, then I definitely recommend that you at least go down to the triple F. Some people say the 4F. I don't think it's necessary. Now, when you are dealing with this, you also have to watch out for some of the powders, such as this one here, Pyrex. They don't use the double F, single F, triple F. They use RS and P. RS standing for rifle and P for pistol. However, once again, referring to Elmer Keith, and in my experience it does work very well, you can use the rifle in the 44 or 45 caliber pistols. In the shorter barrels, you're going to get a little less combustion, but that's just how it is. If you're using a long barrel, 6 or 8 inches, it's mostly going to be burned up. But if you're going to be using, a short like Sheriff's model, you're gonna get some junk in there. So you have to say to yourself, okay, cool. So now I've chosen what size I probably need. What kind of powder do I choose? Do I go with the 777? Do I go with the GoX? Do I go with the Pyrex? Or do I go with whatever this is over here? This is a friend of mine. I've never used this. It is Clean Shot powder. It's also not black powder. Because you have to remember, not all black powders are black powder. It's very confusing. This GoX actually is black powder. 777 Hodgson's is kind of almost. And then we have the substitutes. The reason the substitutes exist is in some places it's very difficult to sell black powder. You have to have a special magazine to store it in before you sell it. Some places require you to register and to record everyone you sell it to and how much. Whereas with the Pyrex, there's a lot less to it. It's a little safer. Does it burn as well as, say, the GoX or the 777? No. It burns a little slower. It burns a little dirtier. But it works just fine. And I shot quite a bit of it over the years. Number one, because it was what was available to me, and number two, because I got a great deal on like 4 cans of it one time. So I shot a lot of it. I can tell you it works very well. The GoX black powder, the true black powder, it does have a little bit more pop. It's really good stuff. Just if you can't get it, that's fine. Powders are fairly affordable. I mean, one of these little cans is going to run you between $15 and $30 depending on the maker. There's some price tags on these, but these are all out-of-date prices because I would definitely recommend, if it's what's in your area, there's nothing wrong with shooting the Pyrex. I know a lot of people poo-poo it on the internet. It works. I've shot it for years, and once again, especially in my longer barreled pistols, it works fine. In my 36s and my 32s, definitely want to shoot the truer black powder, or at least the Hodgson's in it. There's nothing set in concrete on this because it's what's available. And you have to remember, if you want to go back to where all this started, you're talking the Civil War. And in the Civil War, you're not going to have 4 different types of powder for your percussion troops. Sure, you might have that one guy who's got a flintlock musket and he's got his super fine powder that he uses in his pan. But honestly, if you're carrying a 40 caliber pistol or what have you, you're probably going to end up pouring the same powder down your barrel of your pistol as you would down your musket. So it just makes sense that you would try it. And like I said, I've had no issues. It's a little dirtier, yes, but it works just fine. The black powder, once again, a little bit more kick, but if you can't get it, you can't get it. So that's powders that you're going to need. The other thing you're going to need is ball. And not all ball is what it says it is. For instance, this is 32 caliber round ball. The problem is, if you look down here below it, it says .310. Now you would think that 32 caliber ball, that should fit in my 32 caliber revolver, but it does not. Anything under it is not going to fit the way that you want it to. For instance, here is a 32 caliber. Okay. Let's put that at half cock. There we go. Put it at half cock to revolve the cylinder. So this is a 32 caliber ball, and as you can see, it just drops right down in there. Now that's obviously not good. There should be some resistance. You should have to force it in slightly. Not a lot, because if you get to force it in a lot, you can create problems. But it shouldn't just fall right down in there, because then it can just fall right out. And that means it's not going to stay in there. One of the issues is with round ball is generally the size it says is 1/100th smaller than it says it is, because you're going to patch it and put it down a rifle there, and the patching is what's going to catch the rifling. With these pistols, you want it to be at least as large as or larger than, preferably slightly larger than, the rifling. For instance, these are 44 calibers, right? So you're going, oh no, those must be like .439 or something, right? These actually are .451. .451 is actually what you want, and I will show you why. So here is a 44 caliber cap and ball, and here is our .451 diameter round ball. And as you can see, it sits right on there. It does not just fall in. You can see it's caught. You want that. You actually want it to shear a little bit of lead off right here on the face of the cylinder when you push it down with the ramrod, because that means it's in there and it's got a good tight fit. Now if you really just have to torque on it, it may be that they're too large. You don't really want to go larger than .457. .451, .454, it's really what I would stick with. It's what I've always shot. That's where I would stay. You get any larger than that and you can run into issues. But that's what should happen, is it should not fall down into the cylinder. That leads us to our next section. The other thing that you're going to need, some people say you don't, I say you do. Well, I mean, you don't need them. It certainly helps. And that is wadding. Here's a few bags of wads that a friend of mine had sitting around. These are Wonder Wads. These are some generic wadding. When you refer to wadding in a pistol, it's generally a piece of felt soaked in some form of lubricant, cut to the size of the barrel. No, this is not Copenhagen. These actually are homemade wads. It's felt impregnated with beeswax, a little bit of paraffin, and tallow. What these do, the way that I shoot them, there are many different ways. I found for me the best way to load one of these is powder wad ball. And the wad gives you a little bit more pressure seal. It also, once again, seals the chamber a little better, and it spreads that lubricant across everything. I think that's the way to go. That's how I've had the best luck. Wadding in muzzle-loading rifles is different. When wadding a muzzle-loading rifle, you are literally wrapping the ball in some form of wadding, generally flannel or cotton, what have you, and then shoving it down there, and that's what grips the rifling. In these, you actually want the ball to engage the rifling in the pistol barrel. So that's where it's a little different. So wadding is something you will need. Once again, you can find a recipe for these anywhere. There's multiple different recipes, but basically you take a good thick piece of felt. Don't use your wife's good pans. You take a decently deep pan, cover it with tin foil, put your felt in there, melt your mixture, what have you, of lubricants, and soak it into there, let it harden for a while, and then take a punch the size you desire for 36, 31, 32, what have you. Punch them out, and there you go. And that's exactly how I make these. We'll probably make a video just showing that real quickly and with that recipe. The other thing you're going to need is caps. There are many different types of caps. Well, not many. But for percussion revolvers, generally what you're going to see are number 10s and number 11 percussion caps. Now there are many different types of caps for different setups. There are the big winged ones for on muskets. These are different. So the difference in number 10s and number 11s is just size. And we have two different model makes here. We have Remingtons, we have CCIs. I find they both work very well. Generally the CCIs are available at different places. You can see that the CCIs use a red substance and that the Remingtons use a green. I find that they both work just as well. The difference is that the number 11s are slightly larger, the number 10s slightly smaller. These are placed on called the nipples. Obviously, if you're here, you might know this, or you might not. I don't know. So the cap gets placed on the nipple, obviously. Now, what you don't want is one that falls off. Okay, as you can see, that just fell right off. If they don't quite fit, if you have trouble with them falling off, just take them between your fingers and give them a good pinch. Just enough so that they will stay on there a little better. Just kind of take them out around, and they'll stick on just fine. Number 10s fit better on some than number 11s. If you're into the big boys like the Dragoons or the Walkers, 11s are probably your better bet. Now, when I started shooting this, I had a friend who was also into it. At that time, number 11s were almost always available because they're more prevalent on percussion rifles. So we started using number 11s there. And what he did was take small pieces of basically rubber gas line and cutting them out to fit over there. And what he would do is he would take that little piece of rubber and he would insert a cap into it and then push it onto the nipple, and that little piece of rubber would hold the cap on there so it wouldn't fall off even after it was flattened out from the detonation, because when the hammer strikes that, it flattens out. So you're definitely going to need caps. And I generally use number 10s because most of my pistols are smaller. However, the number 11s work just fine. You just got to pinch them a little bit so they stay on. Sometimes they fall off. It happens. But they can be used. If they're too small, don't try to force them on because they'll go off in your hand. That will happen. So, definitely going to need those. The other thing that you're probably going to need is something to hold your powder when it's not in a gallon jug here. This is just a reproduction flask. I actually have a funnel on it that's nice and long, very thin, just so it's easier to fit into these cylinders. They also are measurable. However, they tend to be off. This is, for instance, a 24 grain funnel. And what that means is when I turn this over, I give it a good shake for good measure, and release while it's shaking, let it go, flip it over. In that funnel should be exactly 24 grains. Now I know from experience that there is not 24 grains in there, there's in fact 20, which is a little light. Most of my pistols I shoot 30 grains or more in. If I'm using the Dragoons, the Walkers, etc., I'm shooting between 50 and 70. With these little guys, I'm usually shooting 30, sometimes 25. So you'll definitely want something like that, something to hold your powder with a nice long funnel if you're going to use it this way, because it's much easier than trying to scoop it out. Now, however, the other thing that I do recommend, especially when you're getting started, is to have a nice little flask like this, but also have a powder measure. You can get them most any place. Some of them are made out all brass. This one just happens to be made out of clear plastic because I had one kicking around. It has gradients on the side, and what you do is you just kind of push it up to where you want it to be, tighten it down, move this little thing here, pour your powder in until it reaches the top, and then you know that you have 30 grains. Then once again, just dump it into your cylinder. Really helpful, because the big thing with these is if you do everything consistent in the same way, you'll get excellent results. It's when you start doing goofy stuff that they don't work right. As long as you do the same thing every time, you're going to have great results. One of the issues is if you underload one of these, you may end up with what's called a squib, and that's where the ball doesn't go all the way down the barrel. That's a problem. You can also load it so low that you have horrible accuracy because it's just kind of falling out at the end. In fact, I did that one time. I loaded one of the chambers with only like 10 grains of black powder when it should have been 30, and what I was shooting at, the ball just kind of hit it and fell out. Ridiculous. So that's something you have to be aware of. So you will definitely need some form of measuring tool, and remember that black powder is measured by volume, not by weight. So this is what I use, whatever works for you. You're also going to need a wooden mallet. The reason you're going to need a wooden mallet is these need constant cleaning. You're always going to be cleaning them. And you need 2 tools, well, 3 tools really, to take these apart. One of them being a flathead screwdriver for Colt models. Remington's also, same basic toolkit. But you won't usually need a hammer or a Remington. You're going to need a wooden mallet, flathead screwdriver, and this is called a nipple wrench. Okay? The mallet, see this key right here? It's called a key. Locks the barrel and everything together. Just give it a tap. Yes, it's designed for this. And pull it almost all the way out. And that is how you take apart the large parts of your black powder pistols with that little hammer there. Okay, so you're going to need one of those. You're going to need, obviously, a flathead screwdriver because in order to take these apart, you can see everything is held together with flathead machine screws. The nipple wrench is for the back of your cylinder on your nipples here. It's got one groove cut in it. It fits right down on it. Give it a twist, and out they come. There's a couple of different forms of nipple wrench. This is just the one that I generally use. I think I picked it up at a Walmart, and out comes your nipple. Once again, just put it right in that little slot and put it right back in. You know, kind of tighten it down a little bit. Don't reef on it because they get stuck. Something to also have, and this one carries it, is in the back side we have this little pin looking device here. It's just a piece of wire. It's called a nipple pick. If your nipples get obstructed or whatever, you just kind of right around in there and out it comes. You know, sometimes you'll get a little piece of blockage or whatever. So one of the things that's going to happen, and one of the reasons why you definitely want to have a couple of these, is sometimes you have to take all this apart to clean it a lot of times. Which means you're taking the nipples off, you're cleaning everything in there, so you definitely want to have one. The other thing that can happen is someone decides to play with your revolver, and they dry fire it, and when they dry fire it, that hammer face makes contact with that little nipple face there, and kind of smushes it, and makes it not work so well. In which case you will definitely want to replace those nipples because they're smushed, they're out of shape, you're not getting the proper jet of fire into your powder, so that's something you definitely want to do. Anytime these get really obstructed, you want to take them out and replace them. Nipples are fairly cheap, however, make sure you get the correct nipples to fit your pistol. That you're going to need is a lubricant. When you clean these, they're not necessarily like cleaning a regular firearm. Regular firearm, you take it apart, scrub it with little, hoppies or what have you, and you're done. With these, when you're done cleaning them, and we'll probably do one of those videos sometime soon, you want to take this boar butter and run it down, especially in the barrel. What this is it's basically a seasoning. It kind of builds up a coating on the metal that keeps the crud and stuff from the black powder from adhering and causing pitting, and it's more like a grease than an oil. I use oil on some of the threads and things on the screws, but anything where there's going to be any fouling, I tend to put a little bit of this stuff on there. I also like to put it on the cylinder pin here. So those are really the things you're going to need to get into this. There are guys who don't use this stuff. You read in the old books, and the old timers would, use molten bear grease. Sure, why not? But I find that this boar butter, and this is an older one, the newer ones are generally yellow. I find the boar butter works for me, and a little bit of oil here and there. The other thing that you're definitely going to want, you're going to need a good set of scrub brushes, and you're going to need soap and water. For the barrel and the cylinder, you can use regular ones in a cleaning kit. For cleaning the other stuff, just an old toothbrush. And soap and water is how my grandfather taught me to clean my muzzleloading rifles. It's what I still use today. You may, if something is really really gross and you can't clean it off that way, sometimes dropping them in a pan of boiling water for a little while, pulling them out. Some people say that can change the metal a little bit. I haven't found that it's been adverse, but I definitely find the soap and water method works well. Then you dry everything off, oil what needs to be oiled, boar butter, the other stuff, and that's how you go about your cleaning. So you would also need, a few things, but that stuff you should have in your house. I would hope you have soap and water in your house, dear God. But if all of this stuff, it's a small investment. It's a few dollars for things like this. I mean, you could just use a hunk of wood out of your backyard. I'm sure there were many field expedient wooden mallets in the heyday of percussion revolvers. But all of it, honestly, is really affordable. Most of these things can be gotten at a Walmart, places like that. It's very fun. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.